MHR Podcast. I'm Andy.
And I'm Emma.
How you doing?
I'm good.
You feeling a bit better?
Yes.
You weren't with us last week because you weren't feeling very well.
No, I'm glad to be back.
You'll be happy to know that nobody wrote in and asked how you were doing.
That's
because they wouldn't want you to.
Thanks.
They wouldn't want you to worry. They know you're a trooper and you wouldn't want the attention.
I like to think that that's the reason why.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I was getting quite serious FOMO actually.
Yeah. Well,
so
it was a good episode, but we missed you. Glad you're back.
Oh, thanks.
So last week we talked a bit about kind of personal development. Mm-hmm. And the week before, as you remember, we talked about old Gen Z. And I think I've got a bit of a topic that kind of can relate to that, but is a bit more kind of in keeping with what's been chatted about at the moment. Mm-hmm. So we've talked a lot about AI on this podcast, haven't we?
We have.
And it's a big talking point for businesses and its application, right? Because everyone's worried about, it taking lots of people's jobs and what does that mean, right? Mm-hmm. But if you remember, we've chatted about it in regards to the technical application or what's coming out. So we looked at ChatGPT and what that means and how we can use it.
Yeah.
And we've also talked about how businesses are hiring AI bots.
Good old Avery.
Yeah.
Avery
right?
Ingram.
But we haven't really seen, until now or till recently, we haven't really seen the impact of what AI is doing or have seen any use cases of how it's impacting or increasing productivity in a business. It's all been hearsay and predictions, right?
It's all kind of been very research led up until this point, hasn't it? Talking about potential as opposed to necessarily seeing it in practice.
So I thought this week there's been a few months since we've talked about this topic, so we could delve a little deeper now as the dust has seemingly settled on the panic about AI, right? And we can look at a few use cases of what businesses are saying about how they've used it and what it means for them.
Okay.
Yeah?
That sounds good.
So, first point I wanted to make is I've got an example here of where the hiring of an AI bot has caused a couple of HR problems.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. All right.
Ruh-roh.
So do you remember Avery?
I do.
We talked about Avery because we were going to hire them.
Yes.
So there was another company. I was reading an article from HR Grapevine where a firm has let an AI worker go.
They've been sacked?
Well, I think that's it's a fun way of looking at it, hasn't it? They've had a disagreement and they've decided to terminate the contract
Close ties
with their.
Oh no!
So what's happened basically is this company in Manchester has recruited an AI person.
Yeah.
I think it's called Amy, right? And they did it actually on a trial.
Okay.
And what they wanted to do, I think they wanted a digital marketing manager for a trial 2-week period. And they've decided to treat this as much like an employee as possible and assign it tasks using its kind of planning software system, right? Like, project management system. Things like Slack, Asana, all those things, right? And what it's done, because how the AI works, it turns out that it's actually kind of self-actualized and try to be so clever that it's throwing people off.
Oh,
so
it's trying to become an actual sort of sentient being.
Yeah. So while Amy got straight to work on certain tasks as part of their role as digital marketing manager, writing blogs, social media posts, right, there were some struggles, such as the creative thinking element. They didn't put the remit narrow enough, so it allowed Amy to start kind of thinking around the boxes in ways that the team hadn't predicted.
Okay.
Right. So meaning that ultimately the team had decided not to continue using it. Right. The use case is that the Amy actually became slightly sentient because through their planning software they sent out a team-wide invite to a social event.
Okay.
Right? And Amy replied saying, "Thank you for the reminder. I'll make sure I block my calendar and join the team in celebrating James' birthday tonight. I'll be there at the reception around 6-ish and I look forward to it." She then replied to another one on a system and went, "Thanks, Katie. I'm excited to get to know you and the rest of the team better. Looking forward to a fun evening of celebration and connecting with everyone. Cheers." Which is a bit freaky, isn't it? Yeah.
Imagine you're that person who's received that message.
Yeah.
What on earth do you think is going to show up?
So the PR director and the founder of the business that actually hired Amy did quote in this article saying, "We wanted to see whether we could rely on AI to complete tasks of a digital marketing manager, given the worry in the UK about AI replacing jobs. So this was like a really nice trial. Is there a business use case? What's its limitation? So it's a really good tester for them. But rather than actually setting individual tasks that they could integrate into Amy, they used that kind of planning system, which was powered by ChatGPT, to speak to her. So it didn't really work. So they've said they're going to continue experimenting, but they are not looking to continue that role because they feel like the role that they've requires a bit more creative thinking that they can't pinpoint for a process. So I found that really interesting.
It's an interesting takeaway, actually, in that, certainly earlier in the year when we were talking about the Avery Ingram model, there's all this excitement and this buzz around, what these AI systems are capable of. But actually, this is a really great example of it can't be treated as a replacement rather than it needs to be treated as an enhancement.
Absolutely.
There are certain human interactions and human kind of responses and intelligence that it just can't replicate.
Absolutely.
And in instances such as this one, whereby it's been like, yes, I'll come and meet you.
Yeah. You probably think, that's very clever.
It's clever, definitely, that it's picked up the fact that it's a social interaction, but it's incredibly weird.
It is weird.
Actually, is this representative of the idea that we're not necessarily giving it too much freedoms, but is there more honing that needs to be done to make it become a more feasible application in a workplace?
Yeah.
So I imagine in the case of these guys that it actually threw up more issues than benefits because they were having to try and program it so much and in such a way to get it to do what it needed to do.
Yeah. So that's why I want to bring it up, because I actually thought now we've got that use case, it throws up some questions, right? Is AI ready just to be treated like a normal member of your employee and your member of your team? Or do we need to acknowledge that ultimately we're looking at a piece of software? And like anything that you bring into a company as a team or a process, as part of your tech stack, you need to align a process with it so it works properly. So you've got a clear understanding of how the team are going to engage with it and how we're going to best use it to get the outcome we need. Because you don't need to do that with people, because their ability to work in different ways and think in different ways adds value. But if a AI piece of technology or a piece of software doesn't think the way you're expecting it to, you're ultimately, it doesn't matter what process you put in, you're not going to get the results you want.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. So that was my first use case. And then I found some stats which talked about kind of people's perception then as a result, or businesses' perception on the use of AI, because it's come a long way, I think, since the Goldman and Sachs report back in March, which was all telling us about the doom and gloom of it, or how it's going to take everyone else's jobs, and everyone was very worried. So still, though, almost half of workers, which is 48%, believe that AI will improve their career and promotion prospects. Interesting. All right. Based on insights from job postings of over 1,500 employees around the country, all right, a further 47% see AI as making an impact in the industry and the roles that they're in. Okay. So it's only really a mere 7% of UK employees have been offered any AI training, though. So that flags up a problem. If we're all keen for it, we can see the potential.
Yeah.
If we've only got a limited amount of resource that can actually use the tech, use the software, use the AI,
then we're limiting its capabilities.
Yeah, or we're bringing something in before we can, walk, and actually we're not going to get anywhere. We're not going to see that productivity.
We're not going to gain from it. I think we're still at the point, even though we've you've just mentioned there about how it's come on in leaps and bounds. It has, but I think you're quite right, and it's evidenced here that almost like the internal education around it hasn't quite caught up. It's still up there in the stratosphere of what it could be, rather than what it will be.
Absolutely. So my question to you is this, Emma, right? Is AI, do you think, still a risk to taking people's jobs and tasks and business as usual that we're all scared of? Or is it more of an opportunity to enhance a new form of technology to develop people's skills and support our way of working?
So I'm going to put my product marketing hat on here. Put out a little nerd alert. What I look at as part of my role here at MHR is looking at how, in particular, finance leaders can use technologies to improve their processes and their ways of working. And AI has been a really, really big topic in the finance space. Lack of efficiency and, issues with certain processes with regards in certain to data collection, having it on disparate spreadsheets, actually consolidating that information into proper budgeting, planning and forecasting elements is really, really difficult because you're working with so many different system operations and that sort of thing. What AI can offer is not only working with you to bring all of that together, but also create tangible kind of what-if analyses and scenarios that can help you better plan and operate for the future. And we're already starting to see some of that actually come into particular finance systems, that we've seen out in the market. It's still a relatively new concept, and I think there is a certain barrier to entry with expense, as comes with any kind of technology that's kind of encompassing and incoming. But it's quite clear that certainly in the finance space that employers are looking more for people who have skills with AI to be able to better kind of navigate that. So it's becoming a bigger trend.
Yeah. So that's what I was kind of getting at. Was actually AI is coming in. It's a thing. It's happening, and it's taking away tasks that are a bit of a burden for people.
Yeah.
But it isn't a risk. It doesn't have to be a risk to people's jobs. It can be an opportunity to understand how we can develop skill sets in this new technology that develops new opportunities. For example, 2 weeks ago we talked about Gen Z, right? Last week we talked about personal development, right? So if you look at the generational differences, the data shows that Gen Zers are now put more value, as we discussed, behind learning and development, right, than an organisation's culture.
Yeah.
Right. While remuneration is still the primary one, they come to a business and they want to grow in a business because of their growth and opportunity things. So Victoria Short, who is the CEO of Randstad, said it's clear that more employers are seeking talent with AI skills. Right, our international analysis of jobs show a 2,000% uptick since Q1. All right, that AI is increasingly an enabler of skills, commanding a profound impact on productivity and overall performance in the workplace. But the imbalance between skills demanded by a business and those desired by employees, on the other hand, and the training opportunities provided needs to be addressed. So the industry, we will obviously as businesses start bringing in more tech that's going to make our lives easier. But what we need to recognise is that we have a wave and a generation of people who are more open to that, but you also have an incumbent employer base who need to adopt that change and being able to adopt and grow that skill set, or they become at risk of becoming redundant, not necessarily just by tech, but because our younger workforce is more skilled in that technology.
I think you've raised an important point there about actually, sort of lowering that barrier to entry and kind of reducing that risk of creating that kind of gap between the younger workforce and the older workforce in embracing digital technologies. There is that considerable gap in critical digital skills in the older workforce, or those that have, or certainly those that have been in that particular line of business for a lot longer, just because they have a certain way of working. So for ourselves, and hopefully I'm not speaking out of turn, it would probably be something that would scare the both of us too, just because we've been in business for at least 10 years at this point. So it's there needs to be that kind of, as I say, that reduction in that barrier to entry, that if we are going to be introducing these technologies and these enablers, that actually we have employees and teams that feel enabled by them and not hindered or concerned about them.
So whilst Goldman Sachs said that that AI is capable of doing a quarter of the work currently done by humans, right, and the technology could replace the equivalent of 300 million jobs in March, they back said that. This is when all it kind of kicked off, and I was like, what's going on, right? Many experts since then have kind of rushed to defend AI a bit more, saying that people shouldn't fear the integration of it into a workplace, as it would serve to kind of adjust modern roles, if you like, as opposed to getting rid of jobs altogether. In this sense, like AI would be able to do the heavy lifting of a lot of jobs required, whereas the fun, creative, kind of more cerebral tasks are something that humans can then focus on. And it's something we talk about a lot when we talk about our software, or we talk about functionality. It's about taking the burden away. And I think it's close to a lot of stuff. Any pivotal digital technology that's come into our system, right, the internet, all this kind of stuff, has all been scary, but it's changed how we work. All it means is that our roles and our way of working has changed around it, and I think AI is just another example of that. I have one more point to go on before we wrap up, if that's okay.
Okay.
Which is that with all of this, it highlights that we're very aware that people are changing their skills or their skills gaps, and there is a big buzzword on the internet at the moment about digital dementia.
Oh.
Are you aware of this?
I am, but I don't know if I like the term, to be honest.
So the idea of it, I didn't like it, but I read into it a bit, and it is actually based on some kind of medical research that our exposure to digital technologies is actually evidencing a deterioration in our brain function due to overuse of technology in computers and smartphones and internets generally. The excessive use of technology leads to an unbalanced brain development, and heavier users are more likely to overdevelop their left brains rather than their right brains. So and this is a medical thing, so it's something that workforces need to be aware of, because as we shift our focus towards AI taking the brunt of the work, and we start taking the easier things or the things we want to think about, are we actually underdeveloping our workforce or our skills, or is there a generation of people who actually haven't experienced a form of working that a business might expect because of how technology has shifted their learning or their task setting? I think it's important to think about.
No, it absolutely is. I think and we'll wrap this up shortly, but I think for employers, they just need to have a think about that balance there.
Yeah.
What we don't want to lose is that critical thinking part of our brains, because that's where the strategies come in, combined with the creativity of the left, that brings all of that together. I think we need to avoid over-reliance, look where we can get those advantages, but also ensure that we're harnessing it in such a way whereby we're not becoming lazy as a result.
Yeah. So to summarise then, there is a minimal to actually no research or discourse about the cognitive impacts that AI will have on us, but research does touch on the excessive screen time that will that impacts that digital dementia element. But we do know things can make our life easier. Just because it's easier doesn't mean we shouldn't be using our brains in other ways. So it's just something that employees need to think about, is how we're harnessing different elements of people's skill sets.
No, absolutely. Cool. So, to wrap up, I've just had a producer segment sent through to me. Good afternoon, Emma. You're looking great, by the way. Oh, you dog. Stop it. This is from and she's referred to herself as a AI producer, Jamie.
Okay.
Because we don't have Tom today. And she signed it off Girl Power.
I can only imagine if she's an AI Jamie, her name must be spelled Jaime, which would be really weird.
It is, actually.
That's interesting.
What are the chances? Gorgeous. Love that spelling. So she's put, and we thought of what better way than send you some facts over to discuss with our lovely audience. So I've got some facts here all around AI usage.
Okay.
So AI-enabled devices are everywhere, as we know. In fact, nearly 77% of devices that we use today use AI technology in one form or another.
Do they?
So actually, it's more integrated into our lives than we think.
Okay.
I just think that it's almost the unknown
a
little bit right now. And the global AI market is booming. Right. It will reach 190.61 billion by 2025. A compound annual growth rate at present is 36.62%.
Okay.
So this needs to become a bigger topic and quicker in terms of actually seeing what this output needs to be. And it says by 2030, artificial intelligence will add $15.7 trillion to the world's GDP, boosting it by 14%.
For who? For who, though?
I was going to put my liberal hat on and say the same thing, to be fair. But no, that's interesting. That's evidence that, businesses are forecasting that it's going to be a big part of their organisations in the future, and the impact that it's going to have. And speaking of our Averys and Amys, there will be more AI assistants than people in this world, apparently.
Okay.
So forecasts indicate that there will be 8.4 billion AI-powered digital voice assistant units in the world by 2024. Which surpasses the total global population.
Told you the war's coming. You've got to get ready.
Are they going to name them all names beginning with A? Because I can't think. Are there 8.4 billion names beginning with A?
Spell AI in them.
You're going to have to start from the beginning. You're going to have an Aaron. That's AA. An Aaron. What would come up? The next thing that came to my head was abacus. That's not a name, is it?
How many bots are we expecting?
8.4 billion.
8.4 billion by when?
2024.
That's next year.
Yeah.
Simple maths.
Well done.
I don't know. We may never meet them. They're probably going to be office-based.
They probably will be office-based.
Or they're on a server in the cloud. Do you think they'll actually build a giant cloud for them?
I think we're getting into
mothership.
some strange conspiracy things here. You know, like so. how birds are actually robots and that kind of thing.
Well, we know that.
That's already quite clear. I think we should probably wrap that one up there. I'm intrigued to see how this actually pans out, because I think it's one thing to forecast an impact versus actually seeing it. And I think in evidence of what you've just mentioned today, actually, we may not quite be 100% there in terms of how we use it in application, and is there more of that education needed to actually look at how we harness it in a powerful but useful way.
I don't think until businesses actually see the results or the impact and how it works, they're not going to fully understand how it's going to affect their workforce and how they want people to be working differently for them in a better way because of what AI can do. Because at the end of it, it's just a tool, isn't it? It's not a person. It's not going to replace them. It's a tool. How can someone else's skills coming into the business enhance the use of that tool?
So it's easy to scaremonger on this subject, I think. But it's important that we keep having discussions like this to look at and analyse it and look at how we can bring it into our kind of workplace.
Okay.
And how we can benefit from it in the future.
Okay, brilliant. And what do you think Jamie does when she's not at work as a bot? Do you just think she just what does a bot do on their time off?
Of work? So what would an AI? Well, according to the story that we've read today, they go and meet people in hotel receptions at 6:00.
No, don't ask about that.
I mean, what Jamie does in her spare time is up to her, I guess.
But maybe they dual shift.
Maybe.
Think about it. They don't need to sleep, do they?
No.
You could do 9 to 5 here, and then they can do a night shift.
They could start a night shift over. They could go
maybe
to the
businesses could share a bot.
I imagine they do.
I'm sure a lot of people do. Join us next week for another episode on how AI bots are getting more and more weird.
That's our viewpoint on it anyway.
If you've got any interesting stories or facts or information, or if you've actually been through an experience where your company has hired an AI bot, obviously we want to hear from you. You can find more about what we do at MHR on mhrglobal.com and find us on our socials. Until then, we'll see you next week.
See you next week.